Hey guys, this is my full spoiler review of Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. If you haven't seen the film and don't want it spoiled, back out now. So let me say right off the bat that I did not have any expectations of any kind for this film. I'm a big fan of Kang in Marvel Comics, but I didn't care for the first two Ant-Man films. I was hoping that the movie would be good. I was hoping we'd learn about Kang's origin story, and one of those things sort of happened. I remember before seeing the movie, hearing the director, I think it was, saying that this film was going to be Avengers Endgame level in scope, or that he wanted it to be, and it wasn't even close. It's more like Thor Ragnarok. And of course you had Kevin Feige, who was also hyping up how big the film was going to be, but he said the same thing about all the Phase 4 films, and they all underperformed, except maybe Spider-Man No Way Home. This is the first film of Phase 5, and if it's any indication of how the rest of the phase will go, it'll be another rough few years for the Marvel audience. Long story short, I did not really enjoy this film. I went to see it with my wife, and she didn't really enjoy it much either, though she did say that it was better than Thor: Love and Thunder, so it's got that going for it. First off, I thought this movie was a huge mess of CGI. During the first 45 minutes or so of the film, when the main characters are traveling in the wilds of the quantum realm, I could barely make out what was going on because it was hard to focus on any one thing. And my wife joked that maybe I'm just getting old, but I'm only 29. I don't think it should be that hard for me to see things in a movie. But after we watched the movie, she mentioned that she noticed some bad CGI in a few scenes, but I couldn't have told you when they happened because it all blended together to me. So my complaint isn't that the CGI was bad, just that it distracted from the plot in too many instances, which maybe was their intention. So I'm going to try and give a quick breakdown of the plot before I give my opinions and talk about the characters. Through flashbacks and information from Janet Van Dyne's first-hand account, at the same time that Janet was trapped in the quantum realm for 30 years, she met Kang, a time traveler who himself had become stranded in the quantum realm after his time ship was damaged. Jan helped him to repair the core for his multiversal engine, but through the neurokinetic link of his ship, through which Kang's ship is guided by his thoughts, Jan was able to see into his mind. She sees his memories of wiping out entire timelines and learns that he was exiled to the quantum realm, his ship sabotaged by other Kangs so that he would be trapped outside of time and space. Wanting to stop him from leaving, Jan destroys the ship's power core using Pym particles. Kang would then go on to conquer the quantum realm, having gotten just enough technology from his ship, and from there, Janet becomes a freedom fighter up until her family rescues her in Ant-Man 2. Fast forward to today. This film takes place after Avengers Endgame. Scott Lang has written a book about his life and becomes famous. We get 5 to 10 minutes of exposition in the form of Scott walking around San Francisco and thinking to himself. He can't get over how weird it is that he used to be an ex-con and then worked at Baskin-Robbins before becoming an Avenger and saving the world. It also turns out that his daughter Cassie, who is now in her late teens, has made a habit of being arrested, using Pym particles to be an activist. She also built a device that can scan and map the entire quantum realm, which seems like it would be helpful until it seemingly malfunctions, sending Scott and Cassie into one section of the quantum realm, and Hope, Hank, and Jan to another. So the main plot revolves around the Ant-Man family trying to escape the quantum realm, while the secondary story involves Kang, and includes the inhabitants of the quantum realm fighting a revolution against him, as well as Scott Lang being blackmailed into fixing the ship's core for Kang using Pym particles. It all comes to a head, pun intended, with a giant CGI battle at the end. The heroes win with the help of an army of technologically advanced ants. Still, before he dies, and yes, Kang does die at the end, Kang tells the heroes that he's been trying to prevent the collapse of the multiverse, leading to another 5 to 10 minute scene practically shot for shot to the one at the beginning, where Scott is wondering to himself whether or not he did the right thing in defeating Kang. Also, MODOK appeared, or at least a floating head with guns calling himself MODOK appeared, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. So that was the summary of the plot, but how it actually played out wasn't very good. There were quote-unquote good character moments, but the plot itself is full of holes and overall poorly written. First off, way too much time was spent on the revolutionaries, who are incredibly derivative of Valkyrie, Korg, and Meek from Thor Ragnarok. Plus there's a telepath. Bill Murray also makes a cameo as Krylar, a former freedom fighter. His character actually seemed intriguing, but they kill him off pretty quick. The Valkyrie clone doesn't have a personality beyond strong woman leads revolution, and the other 3 prominent revolutionaries are just there for comedic relief, which seems like an incredibly inaccurate phrase to use when talking about a Marvel film. Comedic relief, especially in the Phase 4 and now Phase 5, makes up the bulk of the films. What you have left over are a few scenes that act as relief from the comedy. In my opinion, there wasn't as much humor as I thought there might be in Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, but the humor that was there was really, really bad. Worse than Thor: Love and Thunder. It's almost like you're watching a movie about Ant-Man and his family lost in the quantum realm, but it's interrupted every 15 minutes by a bad comedy skit. And then when you add in the flashback scenes of Kang or listen to one of his monologues, it's like you're watching a totally different film. The tone is all over the place. If you cut out the comedy bits, the unnecessary focus on the revolutionaries, and the incessant exposition, this movie would have been about 45 minutes long and I would have enjoyed it more. There are also a couple major plot holes. One, how is it that the Avengers could travel through time using the quantum realm, but in this movie they just get stranded there? You're telling me that Scott and Hank didn't analyze the time travel device and build it into the Ant-Man suit in case he ever needed it? Also, why is Kang unable to create a new multiversal engine core with his advanced technology? With his suit's abilities and the technological advancements of the empire he's built in the quantum realm, the film gives us no reason to believe that he couldn't have made a new core or manufactured Pym particles to get out of the quantum realm. He's from the future after all, and he's fought Avengers, so he's got to know what Pym particles are. Now let's talk characters, and we're going to start with the villains first because without a doubt, Kang stole the show. Kang was definitely the star of this film, and yet I absolutely believe that he shouldn't have been the villain for this movie. He just doesn't fit the tone of an Ant-Man story. He should have first appeared in the upcoming Fantastic Four film. It would not only have been more comic book accurate, but it would have fit the plot better, dealing with time travel and the multiverse. Jonathan Majors gave an outstanding performance. Admittedly, I've never seen his work outside the MCU, but I thought he did a great job. He kind of portrayed Kang as this Darth Vader-esque character. That said, I think Kang was slightly mischaracterized because they portrayed him as too emotional. Kang in the comics isn't an emotionally volatile character. He's more cold and calculating than someone like Thanos, I would argue. But I still enjoyed his part in the movie, though I would have preferred to see a Kang origin film because, again, I really don't understand why they put him in Ant-Man. Other than that, they wanted the audience to take Ant-Man 3 seriously. The flashback that shows Kang getting stranded due to sabotage by other versions of Kang is definitely a nod to Fantastic Four issue number 19 and Avengers issue number 8. And I'll discuss that more once I get to the post-credit scene. This version of Kang seemingly died at the end, which I thought was stupid. I thought and hoped that he would be the main version of Kang going forward. That being said, I am still wholeheartedly against race and gender swapped characters. I know the typical response to that is you're racist or you're sexist or whatever. No, I just don't like that they changed the character. The character's appearance isn't up for interpretation with a visual medium like comic books. Readers know what the characters look like. Anyone with internet access can look up the character. I'm not saying that racists don't exist, but the people generally that don't like race or gender swapping, it's because, in this case with Marvel, they've spent decades convincing audiences to get invested in this character. So for those of us who are familiar with the source material, this just isn't the character that we know. It's as simple as that. Speaking of poor adaptations, let's talk about MODOK. I knew before going in that MODOK was going to be played by Corey Stoll, who played Yellow Jacket in the first Ant-Man. Basically, they explained changing MODOK's origin story so that at the end of the first Ant-Man, Darren Cross was shrunk down into the quantum realm, but his head was disproportionate in size to his body. Which of course led to a bunch of expected generic jokes about having baby limbs. I mentioned earlier how bad some of the humor was. Well, there's this dialogue between Cassie Lang and MODOK where she acts like she's saying something really profound to him, even though she's literally just telling him, you don't have to be a dick. And then he has this weird, shoehorned, heroic moment where he sacrifices himself to fight Kang and shouts, I'm not a dick. I knew coming into this that Marvel wasn't going to treat MODOK seriously, but I was still surprised. This wasn't just a departure from MODOK's comic origin, but also the horror element of his character. In Marvel Comics, the organization Advanced Idea Mechanics turned George Tarleton into a technological monstrosity. But then he turned against his masters and took over the organization. And yes, in the past decade or so, MODOK has been treated like a joke in Marvel Comics. But when he was first introduced, he was rightly treated like a scientific horror. The people at AIM served him out of fear, which makes sense because the very concept of MODOK was a commentary on humanity's fear of technology run amok. So to those who say that his being treated like a joke in the film doesn't matter because his character doesn't matter, yeah, he doesn't matter in Marvel Comics now, but he used to when the writers actually gave a damn. If If you want to see a good modern adaptation of MODOK, I would actually suggest playing Marvel's Avengers. With the main cast, of course, you have Scott Lang, the titular hero, trying to deal with the consequences of his daughter's actions. He also fights Kang to a near standstill, which never in a million years should have happened. I don't understand how they can justify that and yet expect us to take Kang seriously as a villain. Scott also took a backseat in this film, even more so in my opinion than Steve Rogers did in Captain America Civil War. There were just too many players on the board and too much emphasis on Kang, Janet, and Cassie. Also, Scott and Wasp are married in this film. Is it just me, or did the relationship between Scott and Hope not get built up enough? It seemed like they flirted on and off for the first two films, and now they're just married out of nowhere. Speaking of Hope, she probably got the least screen time of the main characters. She would just show up at the end of every situation and then not do much for a while. Hank Pym does what he usually does in the movies and summons his aunts to help him solve his problems. Though already with this movie only being less than a week old, the thing he's most known for in this film is his take on socialism. Specifically, Hank is remarking on how his aunts became technologically advanced and progressed into a Class II civilization, and he says, quote, "I know socialism is a charged word, but there's a lot to learn," and then he's cut off. People are making a big deal over that one sentence. Already there's YouTube videos and Twitter comments of Marvel's gone full woke and is pandering to the Chinese socialists. It was shoehorned in, but at the same time, I'm not that surprised to hear Hank Pym say that. Remember, in Marvel Comics, Hank created Ultron, believing it would help humanity. The guy's got good intentions, but he's always been misguided. Also, I would think that if you're against socialism, you would find it funny that it can only work for a species with a hive mind, where the individuals don't think for themselves, and they're all basically dispensable except for the Queen. I'd argue that there were three main characters in this film when you really boil it down: Janet, Cassie, and Kang. Janet was given a surprising amount of depth for a female MCU character. The film portrayed her as flawed, hated, and possibly responsible for genocide, depending on how you view it. Yes, she was usually trying to do the right thing, but her decision to destroy Kang's machine led many people to get hurt. And not telling her family put all of them in danger as well. But in the end, I think she did her best to make amends. And lastly, we have Cassie Lang. Probably my least favorite character in the film. She's smart enough to create a device that can map out the quantum realm, but she uses Pym particles to fight the police and gets thrown in jail, which is stupid. She'd rather be an activist who doesn't accomplish anything instead of getting rich from her inventions and using that money to help people like Hope was shown doing in the film. She also treats her father really poorly while accomplishing nothing on her own. She keeps mentioning to her dad that he once went to jail because he committed a corporate espionage against a corrupt organization and sided with Captain America during Civil War because those were the right things to do. Still, she fails to mention how doing those things caused Scott to miss significant parts of his daughter's life, which is his biggest regret. A third of Cassie's dialogue is telling her dad that he isn't doing enough. Another third is her telling the Valkyrie clone that she is the best ever. And the final third is her saying dumb shit that I think was meant to come off as inspiring or empowering or something. In my opinion, Disney took a perfectly good character from the comics and made her insufferable. This is interesting because I feel they did the exact opposite with America Chavez in Multiverse of Madness. There are two end credit scenes which are actually really good. If you don't usually stick around for the end credits, I suggest doing so for this film. The mid-credit scene shows three versions of Kang, those being Ramatut, the original version of Kang in Marvel Comics, Immortus, who is the end state of Kang, and this guy, who looks like a cyborg, but based on the fact that the other two Kangs represent pivotal points in Kang's life from the comics, I would guess that this is the Scarlet Centurion. These three Kangs remark on the death of the main Kang that we saw in the film, who they call the Exile, and they summon the Council of Cross-Time Kangs to deal with the possible threat of characters in different universes learning about the state of the multiverse and the incursions. If you watch the Phase 4 films, you know that that list of characters with growing knowledge of the multiverse includes the 838 Illuminati, although they're dead, the 616 Doctor Strange, and now the 616 Ant-Man family. The post-credit scene shows Kang, going by the name Victor Timely, telling a crowd about time travel in the year 1901, with Loki and Mobius in the crowd. Loki tells Mobius that that's him, referring to the guy who took over the TVA at the end of Loki Season 1. I love the nods to the comics with both of these end credit scenes, but the second one was a little bit hard to accept. To think that a guy talking about time travel in 1901 and that people would take him seriously, especially as a black man, to me goes beyond the suspension of disbelief. And if your response is, it's a comic book movie, crazy stuff is happening, you can accept super advanced ants defeating a time traveling conqueror, but you can't accept a black guy talking about time travel. except that racial politics were brought up multiple times in both The Falcon and the Winter Soldier and both Black Panther films. So we know that racism does in fact exist in the Marvel Universe. I guess this is just one of the holes they wrote themselves into when they changed the character's race. Despite my criticism, I will admit that this was better than anything put out in Phase 4, except for Spider-Man No Way Home, which is only good because of nostalgia. I did appreciate that all the loose ends were not tied up at the end of the film. What I mean by that is you can tell that Scott has begun to feel a growing dread about the threat to come, similar to Tony Stark at the end of the first Avengers. Whether or not phases 5 through 6 or 5 through 7 can match up to phases 1 through 3, I have no idea. I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm not holding my breath. Let me know what you think about the film in the comments section and whether or not you plan on sticking with the MCU. If you enjoyed this video, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like and subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss out on a new video. Thanks for watching.